Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of NOS4A2, a great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we're picking up immediately where last week's episode left off. Obviously, Christmas Town is pretty much burning and is getting destroyed, and so obviously, Vic gets Wayne, and obviously even with things being what they are, Wayne is still kind of in a state that he's in, so Vic's trying to get him out of Christmas Land as quickly as possible, kind of trying to turn it into a game, because the mindset he's in right now is like, okay, so it needs to be more so a game for him to kind of go along with you. Maggie's not willing to leave because she's like, I can't leave my, tile bag, which is so interesting because now she's so addicted, because once again, she made it clear that she wasn't going to basically, she feels like that's a part of her now, so she's not going to let that go for anything or anyone, because, obviously she went those 8 years without it, but that was like her denying a part of herself. So, but also it's like, if she does, because it was something I thought of, I brought up, I think last episode, if her tiles are left there when Christmas Land falls, it most likely will disappear along with everything else inside. So, obviously Vic leaves with Wayne, but quickly turns back around, once Tabitha and, Lou have them, so that she can go back and get Maggie. Luckily, she shows up in time. I thought was interesting, though, too, is we see that Charlie is running around. I'm like, oh, yeah, all this stuff about you being Father Christmas. Obviously, you care about these children and stuff like that. Did you bother? Well, I was about to say, did you bother looking for Millie? I guess it's like, well, no one knew where Millie was, but it's like maybe he already had a feeling she wasn't in Christmas Land anymore. Regardless, circling back really quickly, I think it's actually interesting. Wayne didn't suffer the same ramifications that Millie did, because he got out of Christmas Land through the shorter way, so I guess it kind of acted as a buffer, so the ramifications, like Millie, as well as that first kid who ended up leaving Christmas Land, ended up disappearing. Millie was in the process of it. Getting her ornament helped, grounded her. It made her kind of solid again. But it's interesting because Wayne didn't have that, because of shorter way, either because Christmas Land is already falling apart, or was it specifically because they used a shorter way? I'm curious, because at that time, Christmas Land was still in full motion. It might have cracks, but it was still existing. So, I don't know. It's kind of interesting wondering, what exactly was the thing that allowed, Wayne to get away without there any issue. To be fair, it could be a combination of everything, that I ended up bringing up. But circling back to it, what was interesting, though, it's like he's leaving all these children behind. It's like, oh, I guess they're not that important to his self-preservation and all that. But then he stopped, because it's like he on the radio started acting up, so he's like, he knew Vic was coming back. So it's interesting. Just as much as Vic kind of was their connection runs both ways. Just as much as she could never let go of him, he could never let go of her. I mean, he was obsessed with her all of season 1, and he continues to be obsessed with her. That's why he went out of his way to get her son specifically. It's like he could have gone after any other child, but he specifically wanted to go after Wayne because it was meant to be a middle finger. Because when he looks at, it's not just Vic, it's a lot of mothers he looks at kind of like his own mother. He kind of blames them and everything. So, but it's just like his hatred, her willingness not to let go of Charlie makes keep chasing after him forever. He, feels the same way. So luckily, Vic was able to get to Maggie in time, but Charlie's there and ends up following them into her shorter way, because it's like, yeah, it's my Inkscape, he can't go in. And Maggie was like, Charlie Makes literally said the same thing about his, and Charlie follows him on the bridge, but Vic stops and it's like, this is my Inkscape, we're not in his anymore, I'm the one with all the power here. So she ends up activating all the bats, which I'm curious what the long side effects of that going to be. Maybe there won't be, maybe they're not, because we still don't 100%, because like I said, Charlie made reference to hey, don't let all the bats get out of your bridge, or what the metaphor is. So it's like I said, it always seemed like she might go crazy, but other than that, what would that just be the only ramification of having all the bats, get out? But it's like she kind of, obviously they make the Batman comparison and stuff like that, so it's like she's summoning all the bats. Granted, Batman doesn't really do that. It's interesting when we actually think about it, because in video games, the Arkham games in particular, when you defeat enemies and stuff, your experience is represented by bats and stuff at least in Arkham Asylum. I don't remember if it's like that with the other Arkham games. Regardless, tangents and all, but her summoning the bats to attack the car and everything, and then her bridge starts cracking and his car falls into the static. I'm like, that's so interesting. It's like, holy crap that you can do that. I mean, to be fair, it's your Inscape, so like she can kind of do it. I'm wondering, was that intentional or was that just a byproduct of her pushing her Inscape? Because her eyes started bleeding like crazy. Like I said, like she hasn't really had that this entire season. Like there's been elements of her eye getting red, but not bleeding like it had in the past. But I guess, once again, this is her pushing her Inscape. And his car falls into a stack. I'm like, oh, I guess he's dead. Which is actually even sadder too, because it's like, I mean, not just there, but in the grand scheme of the episode, it's sad she never got to see Craig again. Like, I think that would have been nice for her to be able to see Craig one. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll come back in some shape or form. Probably won't. But it's just like, because he was there specifically because he was there for Wayne. But like, I just thought it was kind of, I would have liked her to have been able to see him like one last time. It probably would have made destroying the Wraith even harder because she had to destroy it the first time. Maybe that's why Craig didn't appear to him, because it's like, Vic doesn't need me. Wayne needed me. My son needed me. But it's like, no, Vic doesn't need me. If I do a pop-up, it's just going to make her having to do this harder. I don't know. Maybe you could also only see him if you were inside the Wraith as well, and if you had a connection. Like, if Vic was inside the Wraith, again, maybe things would be different. Maybe she could see Craig. Maybe it's just because Wayne was actually in it. Regardless. But then like her bridge starts collapsing and you're like, oh, and it starts turning to static and stuff like that. Luckily her and Maggie get off before then, but it's like, it makes you wonder in the grand. I was thinking like, did Vic like Inscape collapse? Like it might be a thing of it broke down, but eventually it might rebuild itself over time. Like who knows? On the other side of things, luckily Lou and Tabitha figured out like, oh wait, all these ornaments are Horcruxes. Obviously, even Tabitha using the example, being like, wait, like Harry Potter, and it's like, yeah. So they smashed them because it's like these hold people's souls and everything. So it's like they start smashing all of them. Wayne's teeth start coming out. He's throwing up like I guess all the candy and stuff like that he had eaten, but he starts returning to normal. And luckily, everyone's together. He runs over to Lou and Wayne both run over to Vic. Obviously, Tabitha's there with Maggie, and her like tile saying all souls fall or whatever is kind of what this is supposed to represent and everything. So there's that. And I like that we do like a month time skip later, and then like obviously Lou and Vic trying to have some form of a normal life with Wayne, but obviously it's not the easiest thing. Like he's not really eating food. Obviously there's still stuff there because like he was holding a fork in his hand like he was going to stab her. So it's like, okay, so there's definitely issues there in that regard. So it's got to be a thing of like, in the grand scheme of things, like things aren't good. I think that's interesting that it's not like, oh, it's not like a happily ever after. It's like, no, there is still like obviously a lot of psychological damage and just stuff messed up just because of everything they've gone through. And obviously, Lou says like, you weren't ever how long did it take you to get over Charlie Manx? And obviously she doesn't say anything because I think even now, even after everything's all said and done, even after he's dead, it's still a thing of like, is it early? Even if you think it's over, it's like she thought it was over before and it wasn't. She's drawing again, trying not to drink because she's kind of using drawing as her outlet instead of, letting drinking be her thing. And obviously there's the whole situation of, Wayne eating a whole bunch of sugar, and he was like, sugar's what's better for dinner or something like that. But then he kind of snaps out of it. Like he still kind of gets pulled in and out of kind of like the trance of it all. And so later on he ends up sneaking out. I'm curious what his teeth situation is like, because when he was brushing his teeth, his mouth was bleeding. It's probably because like for all the sugar he's just probably been secretly intaking that maybe they weren't aware of. But it might also be like because his normal teeth are growing back in. Like I'm curious how that situation would work. I mean, granted, your normal teeth fall out so that your vampire teeth can come through it as well. But the fact of the matter is he ends up meeting up with Millie, because he ends up having a vision, which is like, okay, so maybe it's probably because, well, and it's interesting because like they both have ties, like the parents have ties to each other and the kids have connections to each other. Like obviously Vic was connected to Charlie, but it's interesting because she hasn't really had that reaction with any other strong creative. Because because she's like the most recent strong creator to pop up essentially. So I guess because her, kind of being the hero of the story, like just in the grand scheme of things, on some like destiny, fate type of stuff, it brought them together. But I guess because of everything, being Vic's son as well as his own connection to Christmasland, he's connected to Millie. And what was interesting, he saw a vision. It was like Lou dead. There was a hammer nearby, and Vic was there. So it's like, is that supposed to represent Vic went crazy and killed Lou? Is it supposed to be someone else did? Is that foreshadowing something? Is that going to be 100% certain? Or, because I was wondering, because you saw Millie and she still had her teeth, like she hadn't broken her ornament. Like the other kids came out of Christmasland normal, and you're like, oh, that's dope. At the same time, it's like, oh, what was it? Mike was looking for his dad. It's like, oh, that's sad. But also you're thinking like, some of those kids have been missing for decades, so it's like their family isn't around anymore. Especially because there's the lady that was looking for her grandson last season, the one that was trying to hurt Charlie, but she ended up dying. Like her son and grandson, I think, ended up disappearing. But the fact of the matter is her grandson's probably there, but obviously like that lady died last season, so it's like, So, like, obviously Tabitha's trying to set up a thing to, like, get the kids adopted. It doesn't work out because a lot of the parents kind of return the kids because much like Wayne isn't fully adjusted, he's kind of a little messed up. So is every other kid. I mean, and Wayne was only there for a short amount of time. And granted, who knows, like, how time works. Like, he might have been there for a short amount of time, but who knows in the grand scheme of things, like, how time works in Christmasland, especially when you've had everything kind of wiped away from you. You're just all about the sweets and the fun and everything. But some of those kids, once again, have been there for decades. So it's hard to kind of break that. Even having your soul returned to you doesn't kind of erase all that time they spent in Christmas. I wanted to return to Christmasland. But circling back to Millie, the fact of the matter is they're sitting down talking and stuff I thought was interesting, because it's like, oh, I'll never see my dad again because your mom killed him. He's like, sorry. And because I was wondering if she's going to try and get revenge on Vic or something like that. But for her, she doesn't want to destroy her ornament because she doesn't want to be ordinary. She wants to keep being special. But at the same time, it's a thing of like, because obviously for her, it's like, don't you want to grow up? But Wayne's like, no, I don't. Because her mom had convinced her, like, oh, you'd be able to go out and, who she was before wanted to grow up and stuff like that. But sadly, she's not the Millie she was before she went to Christmasland. She's been in Christmasland so long that it's just like, it's like she thought that's what she wanted, freedom, but now it's like she doesn't get to sleep in Christmasland anymore. She has to sleep outside. She has to hunt for her own food. Like, it's like, but also it's like learning like, oh yeah, things aren't good with being an adult in the real world, because it's like now you have to pay bills, and the fact of the matter is Wayne is basically like, people pretend that they're happy when in actuality they're not. They're actually sad, they're tired, and so he's just saying basically being an adult sucks. So it's like, even though there's cool things you can do about it, it's just that child perspective of like being an adult sucks, with all that comes with it. But obviously Millie wants to rebuild Christmasland, and she wants Wayne's help to do it. But obviously, like, Vic gets there in time, and he's like, how'd you know I was here? She's like, I don't know. It's like, once again, like, that connection, despite everything, is not completely broke. Maybe it's just because, maybe that's interesting. Maybe it's like, even though her inscape is maybe broken right now, because it doesn't seem like she's tried it, at least from what the episode kind of showed. So, but maybe on some level her inscape is still there, and so it's like she knew, like, wait, where is my son? And she just was naturally drawn to him, because maybe that's how her inscape represents itself for now, because it doesn't have a physical form anymore, at least right now, until potentially it gets rebuilt, or maybe it manifests in a different shape or form now. Who knows? So it doesn't necessarily have to always take the form of a bridge. It's just obviously because the bridge also has like a connection, personal connection to her, because she ends up talking about later on her dad ended up demolishing it. So there is a connection in that regard. So, I'm curious to see what that kind of ends up potentially, what that could be later down the line. But obviously there's a lot of, interesting conversations between Vic and her mom, because her mom is like asking, if, he's okay, if Wayne's okay. Because obviously it's like all this stuff, like obviously they're going through a lot of Chris's stuff, and obviously like kind of them, like, it's like for her, it's like despite everything, obviously Linda's like, I miss him. It's like, it's like we met when we were 12 years old and stuff like that. And obviously, Vic's is like, he told me to forgive myself. And, Linda's like, I try to. And it's like, she likes to think that she has, but she also brought up this whole interesting because like Vic is like, I used to kind of felt like you were like, we'd suffocate because of just how tightly you held on to me. But now she's like, I get it. After everything that's going down, it's like, especially with Wayne being in a state that he's in now, But I thought it was interesting where Linda was like, her biggest regret is like not being more open about everything that was going down. Like she was like, maybe if she wasn't always cleaning up Chris's messes, and that maybe if they were a little bit more open about everything that was going on, she's like, and Vic is like, oh, I wouldn't be the teenage alcoholic mother that I am. It's like, but it's like at the very least maybe things would have been different, with Vic's upbringing, and who knows how different that. It's like we should have just, maybe if we just kind of talk things through instead of just pretending like everything was okay. So I thought that was neat. I even love her being like, yeah, you guys stay here for a while and you can keep that Lou, and it's like, oh, that's super adorable. But in the grand scheme of things, it does lead to this interesting thing where Vic does talk to Wayne. It's like, no, it's okay to miss Christmas. And she's like, I miss Charlie, like the feeling of how it made me feel to chase after him, And so, because Wayne had drawn a picture of him and Millie, and he was hiding it, but Vic found it, and she wasn't getting angry. She was trying to, it's like, no, like my mom said, we need to talk about it, like saying that going forward, like, because he was like, I think there's something wrong, and she's like, I feel like that sometimes too, like that's the reason why I chased after Charlie, that's why I drank, that's why I left you and your dad. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, in the grand scheme of things, she's like, I'm going to be here. Let's stay here in reality. The fact of the matter is, no more pretending like we're okay. That goes for you, that goes for me, and that even goes for Dad. Like, because Lou has officially adopted Wayne, so that's sweet. But at the same, because she had that conversation with Maggie, because Maggie was like, oh, it's all done, but it's like, hey, there's other inscapes out there, the world of thought. Like, we could do so much to explore it, because not every, strong creative out there is like Charlie, it's like there's people like Jolene, and then there's people like Vic, so there's good out there too, like, oh, we could explore so many other like worlds essentially. But obviously for Vic, it's like trying to explore that world of thought and stuff like that nearly got her entire family killed, so it's like, I'm not going down that route again. Like that obsession with Charlie, the obsession with that world destroyed parts of her life, and kind of messed her and her kid up, so it's like, I'm not going to go down that route again, because in the grand scheme of things, like, sadly things didn't work out between Tabitha and Maggie, despite everything, despite how Tabitha feels about Maggie. It's like she ends up bringing her tiles back. It's like, I was planning on throwing them away, but then Maggie was like, yeah, they probably would have found me again anyway, because one of the kids ended up having her tiles on her, but the fact that one of the kids had her tiles. But, as we know, because of last season, she threw her tiles away. They still ended up finding their way back to her. But because she was basically saying, like, oh, if you ever have a question, like, if you need help, like, maybe with a case or something, you need some help, like, you can always come to me, like, But obviously, her saying that even more so probably made Tabitha go, like, you be okay, Maggie. Because it's like, it doesn't change, it's like she wanted to be there for Maggie because she does care about Maggie. She does love Maggie, but it's the thing of, like, that's a lot to kind of still process. Like, a lot of that stuff she brought up beforehand, like, about, like, wanting kind of some form of a normal life, that still resonates as a little true. So obviously, like, even in this position, in this situation, it still doesn't kind of change that. And so Maggie saying that probably solidified it even more for Tabitha of like, yeah, I can't come to you for help. It'd be convenient and easy, but it's like, I can't bring myself to be a part of this world. And so we'll see what that really ends up being like in the end. But I thought was interesting though was because Maggie's like, well, this is kind of, maybe this is all meant to be because it's like my tiles found their way back to me. It's like, don't know, you're a little incorrect in that. Tabitha brought your tiles back to you, so don't make her regret it essentially. But then there's also like the wraith was found, it's broken into pieces, and we found Charlie's body. It's where the original bridge that her Shorterway is based on, his body was there because it's like Christmas Land led to Gun Barrel because that's where Charlie was, like his home and stuff like that, before Christmas Land and everything. But for Vic, her the original bridge was there, and her like I brought up earlier, her dad had demolished it, so they're crushing the car. I was wondering whether or not we were going to see something for Craig in the last moment or something, but still nothing. Because he didn't say anything about it either, because probably to him it's like either he doesn't remember or he didn't think much of it because he still doesn't know who Craig was. He doesn't know, like, oh, that guy that was trying to help me, I don't know who that dude was. It's like he doesn't know that was his dad, probably until like he potentially sees a picture of Craig. But now it's kind of fully over, everyone being there watching the car get destroyed, and Charlie was cremated, so ain't no bringing him back. And now that the car's destroyed, but still it's like there's remnants of it. You're like, as long as no one tries to put it back together, it should be fine, but we'll see. Another interesting thing is Maggie's looking for a way into the world of thought, so she heads to a hotel. I'm not sure if that's the same hotel she met with the Hourglass dude, or is it? I think it might be, but maybe I'm mistaken. But she takes an elevator, and because I was wondering, is she going to call? Was it Parnassus? I always kind of forget the place where all the other strong creatives from the Night Road ended up meeting, that Charlie was a part of, like Abe and all of them, because they're still out there. I don't see any of them necessarily getting any revenge for Charlie. Just kind of like, Charlie's situation's his own, ours is ours, so we're not going to worry too much about it. But she goes to that hotel, and like that look on her face, because it's like, Maggie, it's so interesting because like obviously like Vic didn't want to be a part of that world anymore. It's interesting because Maggie is a medium, and that particular word fits her situation so interestingly enough, because she's not technically a strong creative. Even with her tiles, she's in that world while also not being a part of it. And obviously reality kind of sucks, because like a lot of the people she cares about, like Joe for example, are gone. Obviously everything with her and Tabitha, but it's like her tiles mean so much to her, so it's they're kind of filling a hole in her as well. Vic is trying to fill that, all that, with just being with her family, staying in reality, not being worried about her bridge, kind of like the world of thoughts and strong creators. She's just trying to live in reality and not kind of go down the rabbit hole again. And Maggie seems like she's going down that, which is interesting, because like we know that Maggie has her addiction, so it's like her addiction eventually, now rather than it being drugs and stuff like that, she's feeling that addiction, that vice with her tiles, and now potentially this world of thought. So it's like, is she going to meet up with the other people from the Night Road? Is the hotel going to take her to it? I doubt that. It's probably going to take her to another group of strong creatives. So like, maybe she creates a community like that's the polar opposite to Parnassus, to the Night Road. Maybe not. So there's that. And then obviously there's a whole situation with Millie at the end, because she had made a point that, she was going to get all the children back. She was going to, do Christmas Land herself. So, I'm curious to see kind of what that potentially would look like. At the time of me recording this, it hasn't been announced whether or not AMC is renewing NOS4A2, because let's not also forget that it is also like simultaneously airing on BBC America. So I'm curious, like, would that have any effect regardless anyway? But anyway, the fact of the matter is, I hope that it does come back for a third season, because I'd love to see, like, okay, so obviously, because I was wondering, I was like, if Charlie Manx going, because I figured this was going to be the end of him, so I was like, where would things potentially go? Like I said, would it have led to her chasing after the rest of, like, going up against the other Night Road? Like, I think, like, her hero days are done. Maybe not. It's actually interesting. I made that whole point about, like, her shorter wave manifesting itself as something other than a bridge. She was making that drawing about, like, a hero or something that could, find, Wayne, but then, Lou was like, no, you found him and you brought him home. So it's just interesting, because that might lend itself to that whole thing. But, and obviously that one chapter is closed, but obviously she knows Millie's still out there. Also, like, Wayne is still kind of drawn to this whole situation, so that's always going to be a tie of, like, him never wanting to give up on Christmas Land and everything. So, will Millie be, like, the antagonist of the next season, potentially? Like, especially if she's trying to rebuild Christmas Land, because it's like, you're going to be kidnapping kids. It's like, because that's going to be a complicated thing, because it's like, are you going to go down the same route as your dad? Because I'm sure your mom was hopeful that, you being free would, you'd have the potential just to kind of live your own life, but it's like, no, she's just kind of, once again, it's like the kids and have to kind of are stuck in that cycle of their parents, so it's like she's kind of messed up in her own right, much like her dad was, so she's kind of stuck in that cycle as well. And Wayne is, but at the very least, Vic, by trying to be like, it's okay not to be okay, and for us to embrace when we're not okay and not try to pretend like we are, maybe that is breaking the cycle. Maybe things could change. Like maybe it doesn't have to be kind of a repeat of history over and over again. Like obviously we've seen, in their family. So it's going to be interesting. A lot of that family dynamic, I'm sure it'd be kind of interesting. I wonder, is it going to be anything more with Bing or not? Probably not. He's locked up. He's done, so, I mean, is he going to ask like Vic to visit him anymore or anything like that? I'm curious. Tabitha, will we see more of her? I mean, I think eventually it's going to get to the point where, like, even though she's going to try to live a normal life, it's like probably things will still keep pulling her back to that world, and maybe that might get her trying to involve Vic, even though she might not want to. And the whole thing about Maggie, like I said, spiraling down that rabbit hole of like trying to enter the world of Vault and what that could be, what that means for her. Because there's also the potential that her going down this route could make her the next Charlie Banks. I know that's kind of a stretch, but it could be like, you getting so seduced by that world and kind of that being your everything, feeling like you kind of like, you're done with reality. You rather, the world, I thought there's so much there, like, getting lost in it could warp her mind, turn her, down a bad route. Who knows? Like I said, hopefully the show comes back for a third season because I'd love to see where all this would go. I'm actually curious to do some research because I haven't read too much about like because I'd be curious to see some of the differences between the book and the show, because I'm wondering like how it compares of like how much, obviously, like I said, I'll probably get my own answers, but someone that might be listening to this might have already read the book, so they can probably give me a little more insight to be like, okay, the book changed this, and this, but also like, would it be a situation of is there more of the book to tell, or has the, show so diverted away from the book that it's kind of like, it's actually hard to tell where it could go, or whether there is stuff in the book that it's like, oh no, there's still plenty for it to pull from. I don't know. I'm curious, in the grand scheme of things, because who knows, like, for example, this could be where the book ends storyline wise, but like obviously the show has the potential to go even further. Maybe not. Like I said, I'd have to do my own, research and kind of comparing contrast. But regardless, like I said, that's just kind of its own thing. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.